right, we'll call to order the Committee on Synthetic Drugs and Controlled Substances, and I would also like to welcome Chair Paymar and members of the Public Safety Committee, as well as Chair Liebling and the Health and Human Services Policy Committee. I'm sure more members may be trickling in as we move along here, but with a full agenda, I'd like to get started. And before we start with our testimony, just for the folks that from the other two committees that haven't been through any of these, essentially this select committee has been moving around the state over the interim, taking testimony from different communities about the impact of synthetic drugs on their particular communities. And we've heard some really powerful and compelling testimony virtually everywhere that we go about, personal stories, impacts on families, impacts on individuals, as well as impacts on the community itself. And the financial impact and the impact to the business community sometimes is negatively affected. And essentially, we've heard some really good things. So our task as we move forward with this select committee is relatively structured. We are to present a report back to the legislature when we convene in February, which essentially will include two pieces. One will be any recommended legislation that the select committee chooses to recommend. And the second piece will hopefully be a suggested new educational program / prevention program aimed at just getting information out there on synthetic drugs, what they are, what the hazards are, what the implications are. So that's kind of been the essence of our work. Today we're doing two things. We're going to take testimony from the metro area on the impact of synthetic drugs, and we think we've got some really good speakers lined up. And the second piece of today will be a presentation from the Department of Human Services about just what they think might be a good recommendation with respect to a new educational program. So looking forward to that. And with that, unless there's any questions, we can get started. Representative Schoen.
I was pointing at Laura, sorry.
Okay.
That was for me.
Okay, our first testifier today will be from North Memorial, Dr. Conorado. If you're here, feel free to come up. Good afternoon. Welcome to the committee. If you just please identify yourself for the record.
Dr. Mark Contarato. I'm an emergency medicine physician at North Memorial since 1992. I'm also Office of the Medical Director for the North Memorial Ambulance Service. Been there since 1993.
Welcome. Thank you. Go ahead with your testimony.
Well, what I'd like to talk about is the impact that I see on a personal level in both the emergency department and also on the street level in North Minneapolis. Since synthetic drugs, I assume we want to speak about both synthetic marijuana and the substitute canthinones, also known as bath salts. And those are the two I'm most familiar with and have seen the most of. One of the things that happens, especially with synthetic marijuana, is that there's a perception that it is a safe drug. It is not. It is actually a completely different drug than marijuana. Marijuana itself has about 60 different cannabinoids and formulations of cannabinoids in it, depending on the strain. Most of the synthetic marijuanas are actually one or two very specific chemicals. These chemicals have been synthesized since the early 80s, late 70s. And they have specific properties that have never, ever been specifically researched. These drugs were initially developed for research purposes only, to test on lab animals, to see if there was any medical use for these cannabinoids. Now that they've gotten into the system, we are seeing effects that we have never seen before. Usually a person who smokes marijuana is usually it has a relaxing sensation. They become maybe a little more introspective. They actually tend to quiet down a bit. With the synthetic marijuanas, we're seeing totally different effects. We're seeing nausea, we're seeing vomiting, we're seeing paranoia, we're seeing seizures, we're seeing convulsions, We're seeing things we have never seen before. The problem with these substances is that some of these symptoms don't go away. Some of these substances are triggering paranoia reactions, psychotic reactions that persist. One of the effects of all cannabinoids is that they will go into certain cells in the system and may be re-released. The body holds on to them and then re-releases them. So these people who have smoked the cannabinoids will have true flashbacks of sometimes very involving paranoia, psychosis, and sometimes very terrifying flashbacks. And so can become a they can have repetitive variations on these symptoms. The other consideration is when you look at the synthetic cannabinoids, you don't know what's in there. Okay. There's approximately 450 synthetic cannabinoids that have been developed. Right now, certain of these cannabinoids have been declared illegal, but there's a whole slew of them that have not. There's no testing of these substances. There's no quality control. You don't know what is in this. It would be akin to going to the liquor store and buying a bottle of alcohol. It says alcohol. You don't know what percentage. You don't know what else has been mixed in. It could be derived from a product that you have a high allergy to. That's one way of looking at it. Okay, so the potential for these people to have severe reactions, ongoing reactions, is huge. When we talk to bath salts, or what's known as the substitute canthinones, we're looking at a substance that is an order of magnitude even higher than synthetic cannabinoids. They're supposed to mimic the effects of the methamphetamines, such as MDMA, Molly, ecstasy. That's what they're supposed to mimic. Again, these are chemical substances that have never been tested on humans or used with humans, have never really been tested on animals. They all come from a very similar chemical backbone. Prosecution and illegality can be changed by just switching a chemical side chain. You can look at whole communities across the United States that have been adversely affected by these. But what are we seeing in the emergency department? What are we seeing on the streets? We're seeing people who are having terrifying hallucinations. We're seeing seizures, convulsions, cardiac arrests. Okay. You may be familiar with the term agitated delirium or excited delirium. We've had multiple deaths in this state from people who have had this. And this is basically adrenaline overload. These substances are causing an adrenaline overload in the system to where these people do not sense that they are in a compromised situation. If we go out and exercise, we normally feel when we're getting tired. We normally feel that lactic acid buildup. We know to pull back. These people don't. This feedback mechanism is gone. So they will go into the point of excited or agitated delirium. When this happens, what normally happens? You have a person who is going berserk, who is running through the streets, usually naked or mainly or only partially clothed, attacking other people, attacking vehicles. So what happens? What's the normal response to people? They call the police, right? Police come. They have to try to subdue this patient. This patient usually has no sense. They are totally confused, disoriented. They have no sense as to what's going on. All they know is people are trying to hold them down and attack them. They literally fight till their death, till they go into cardiovascular collapse. Then what do we have? we have a death in apprehension, we have a death in custody. Not the officer's fault. They were doing their job. But this is what we're left with. I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions from the committee, any of the committees, really? Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much. And I think probably members of my committee who are not on the select committee might be at a bit of a disadvantage here, and I don't want to go over a lot of territory that other members already know, but if you could just kind of give us a sense of how pervasive a problem are we talking about. Now, you're in the metro area, I believe you're at North Memorial, you said?
Yes, I am.
Right. So could you just give us a sense of how many people or, how many incidents of these, these pretty horrible incidents you're talking about have we seen in your catchment area?
Dr. Colorado.
I would say in my practice, I am not full-time in the emergency department now as I'm managing the ambulance service, and talking with my partners, we're seeing 1 to 2 of these substitute canthanone patients a week. Synthetic marijuana, a little harder to quantify, maybe once a week. Okay, but North Memorial Ambulance Service also covers about a quarter of the state of Minnesota with its services. So we cover areas where there are other colleges, universities. We're seeing it in the pre-hospital setting in a significant number of areas in there, such as down in Marshall, Minnesota. We're seeing it down in Faribault. I can only speak to the areas that our ambulance service covers, but we're seeing it not just there. We're seeing it all across the state. One of the problems I can't stress enough is that this is not a problem with just local distributors, local people bringing in this, such as up in Duluth, where the shed shop owner was recently convicted. These are chemicals that are easily accessed over the internet. You can easily, right now, if I had access to the internet within a minute, I could bring up a website where I could buy any kind of these bath salts, synthetic cannabinoids. I could get a day's supply of the synthetic bath salts, or the bath salts, for $30. Enough to keep a person up and going for 24 to 48 hours, easily. That's one of the major problems, is this is readily available, and it's not just available, it's not just a local issue. It is a statewide issue. It's an issue that we have to look at other means besides just local law enforcement or even statewide law enforcement, and something where we can look to prevent this from coming into the state. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Representative Mullery.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, maybe this is coming up later, otherwise he might be one that would be good to answer it. My question was, I remember some federal court cases that said we couldn't make a compound illegal just by being similar to something that to a different compound that actually had proven to be detrimental to humans, that a new compound, until it was proven to affect humans negatively, strongly, we couldn't make illegal. What's the law on that right now? And I know he's an officer, so he might know, but maybe you have somebody coming up later that would be even better.
Representative Muller, that's a really good question, and I don't know, Doctor, if you want to comment on that or not. Otherwise, I do think that we might have some other testifiers that may want to.
You may have another testifier who's more familiar with it, but if my review of this, there was a law passed in 1984, which was I believe called the Drug Analog Act. And what it basically said, the gist of it is that if you produce a drug that mimics the effect of a banned or outlawed drug, and it is perceived to be an analog of this, that can be outlawed too, and you can be prosecuted on the basis of producing that drug to distribute. And I believe that is the Analog Drug Act, and I believe it was 1984. It is a federal statute.
Good, thank you. Representative Mullery, that may come up again later. I don't know if you want to
Yes,
follow up.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to ask it now because the court decisions were I know about that statute. The court decisions were way after that, so I'm just wondering what the present is.
Okay, we'll follow up on that. Any other questions for the doctor? Doctor, I want to thank you for coming today. That testimony was helpful, very good to hear, and I appreciate you taking the time to come here.
Thank you.
I'm just going to go down my list. Some of these folks may or may not be here, but is there Dr. Ling from North Memorial?
No, he will not be here.
Thank you. Moving on, Carol Falkowski. Here she comes. Welcome to the committee.
Hello.
Go ahead and state your name for the record, if you would, please.
Yep, I'm Carol Falkowski. I'm President and CEO of Drug Abuse Dialogues. I'm former Drug Abuse Strategy Officer at the Department of Human Services, former Director of the Alcohol and Drug Abuse Division, author of the State Substance Abuse Strategy you'll be hearing about, and former Director of Research Communications at Hazelden. And I am pleased to be here, so thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
One of the things I've been involved with for a number of years is monitoring drug abuse trends for the National Institute on Drug Abuse by writing a quantitative report every 6 months that looks at indicators related to substance abuse in the Twin Cities. Then I get together with my colleagues from 20 other cities to talk about drug abuse trends. So it keeps me in the forefront of emerging drugs of abuse. To Representative Liebling's question about the extent of consequences related to these substances in the Twin Cities, I direct your attention to the most recent report on drug abuse trends in the Twin Cities. It's a handout here for the committee, and it's dated June of 2013. On page 16 of that report are exposures to selected drugs reported at Hennepin Regional Poison Center. The Hennepin Regional Poison Center serves the entire state, and it does, their calls do break down pretty much proportionate to population. And you can see, if you find that chart on page 16 of that report, that the increase in bath salts, or these synthetic cathinones, they first appeared in 2010 with 5 exposures reported. In 2011, that went from 5 to 144, and then it declined in 2012 down to 87. Another group of research chemicals that the doctor referenced are things that we became aware of in the Twin Cities in 2010 when a party of young people involved the ingestion of some of these research chemicals and resulted in the overdose death of one young man. Those 2CE category of drugs went from 10 exposures in 2010 to 23 in 2011, 24 in 2012. And you can see also the synthetic THC that went from 28 in 2010 to 149 in 2011 and 157 in 2012. I think if this committee has been going around the state, you've heard not only from this doctor but from other medical professionals about the acute consequences of these drugs for people immediately under the influence of them. Nationwide, emergency rooms, based on the Drug Abuse Warning Network, there have been 23,000 episodes involving bath salts across the country in 2012. So it's not just a state problem, it's a nationwide problem. I want to share one quick story about the long-term effects. Because these substances are not ever approved for human consumption, they have very untoward effects, and some can be quite long-lasting, even after the immediate effects of the drug are over. I did a training last year for state-operated services for the Department of Human Services when I worked there, and was talking to people who worked at state-operated services and asking them about the patients that they see who have been prolonged bath salt users. And they said they come in presenting with psychosis. And unfortunately, many of them leave still in a psychotic state despite all of the efforts to get that resolved. And the population that goes to state-operated services are pretty severely impaired, chemically dependent patients. Right, Dave? Yes. And the average length of stay, I said, well, how long are these people there? I mean, and I'm always a wise guy that kind of gets me in trouble. I said, well, they're there a week. And they said, no, they're there 40 days. So that some of these have resulted in psychosis that's very long-acting. And I think that's something that we need to bear in mind that brings added urgency to the work of this group in trying to figure out what to do and to do that as quickly as possible. We know that these chemicals are a moving target. There are charts that I've seen from my colleagues at the federal level showing that when they passed the Synthetic Drug Act in 2012, that the samples submitted to the DEA of synthetic marijuana, the chemicals actually changed so that the ones that were on this big long list of chemicals were no longer appearing in what they had seized, but a new group of chemicals, so that people are very ahead of the curve in the manufacturing of these products, and they do change the formulations of them. This puts an extra burden on law enforcement because, as you mentioned, you can't outlaw what doesn't exist yet, and it means that our traditional way of having a list of substances that are illegal and then enforcing those laws, that paradigm is going to have to switch, and that really is the million-dollar challenge to everybody in this group. Last year, about a year ago, I was on a panel in Chicago with the Illinois Attorney General's office on bath salts. That was the topic of the panel. And they talked about their experience in Illinois, which I wanted to just share with you. In Illinois, they have a Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Most states have one, like the federal one. And what they did in Illinois was they had a spiffy name for this initiative that I can't recall. It was Operation something, but I can't remember what it was. But the Attorney General's office wanted to do something about bath salts in that state. They found that many of the retailers who were selling these had received a letter from the manufacturer saying, we just want you to know that none of the chemicals that are in our bath salts are illegal. So you can rest assured that what you're selling is not an illegal product. And the retailers, showed them this letter. Well, there is no truth in advertising. And maybe they weren't on the list of controlled substances, who knows. But what they did in Illinois was they beefed up the penalties of their Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And then the Attorney General went to some of the retail outlets. This was an initiative of the Attorney General's office, and had a person, I don't know quite how to say this, kind of schmooze the retailer into admitting, well, it says not for human consumption on these packages, but people really do take these. I mean, humans really do take them. That's what they're for, right? And kind of cajoled the retailer to admit that they were for human consumption. Once the retailer did that, the person from the Attorney General's office left. 10 minutes later, agents from the Attorney General's office showed up and said, you just admitted to one of our agents that this is for human consumption, and if it is, we notice that it's not labeled correctly. And each violation is worth so many, thousands of dollars for each packet that you have. So you can quit selling them and just let us take this product, or you can fight us in court on this. But they're really, it's a mislabeling thing. And they only, and again, I was on the panel with the person who was involved in that talking about this, and he said they only had one incident where an attorney was called by the store owner, and the attorney said, you better just let these people take it. And by doing this, it was labor intensive, yes, but by doing this, they removed over $1 million worth of products from shelves like this. And it's a different way of going about it by going through the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And I thought it was pretty interesting. So I wanted to share that with you and plant the seed that that's something you could look into doing in Minnesota. And yes, it's labor intensive, but it was very effective. And they were able to measure their results by looking at their poison control calls in that state decline pursuant to doing this. Finally, I just want to underscore that it is a changing world in terms of how people get drugs and purchase drugs. And just as young people don't think twice or don't blink about getting things over the internet or getting things online, that is particularly involved in this area as well. Most people in this room recall when there wasn't an internet, much less there wasn't a mechanism for purchasing things that way, so we have a built-in skepticism about it. But many young people have no skepticism at all and no hesitation for doing things. It also changes the world because in the past, when the buzz about a drug, that youthful exuberance about this drug is great, you have to try this drug, was kind of contained within social networks of people, and I mean social networks in the old-fashioned sense of people you know and your circle of friends. Now, that youthful exuberance spreads through texting and social messaging and Instagramming instantly. So it creates a bigger challenge for those of us who are trying to protect people from substances that can not only create untoward consequences while they're under the influence, but possibly long-term. So I just wanted to share those experiences with the committee and underscore the challenge that you are facing in doing this. And I assume you've heard from Cody Weiberg, who we are really lucky to have in the state for our Board of Pharmacy, of telling you all the particular chemicals, and he is on top of that. But in addition to doing, again, that model of saying, here are the substances that are prohibited, because they can just be changed one little molecule, we have to think of a better way to approach it. So I'm happy to be here and have any questions. I'll stop talking.
Representative Schoen.
Mr. Chair, ma'am, I missed what state you said was related. You said they did something with the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and whether that was, it was Illinois, sorry. And was that their state law, or did they use some sort of federal provision, or?
They use their state law.
Okay, thank you.
Which mimics the federal one. Most states have. I'm assuming you must have looked at that here, right? Yeah.
Don't assume.
All right. Well, I'm sure we have one.
Mr. Chair,
Representative Pamler.
Ms. Balkowski, for as long as I've been here, you've been the expert on drug trends in the state, and I guess I'm just asking you. I haven't been part of the select committee, but what recommendations do you have for us, if any?
About the whole synthetic drug thing, I think my recommendation is to act, decisively and think differently and do it soon, because it's a changing world, and it is really important for lawmakers to figure out new ways of protecting the public. I believe that laws protect the public, and with these group of products, I'd encourage you to look at what Illinois did. I'd encourage you to look, is there possibly some sort of language that even though these are cleverly labeled not for human consumption, that you can word some legislation to help get them out of harm's way. I don't have $1 million answer, but I think ever since I have been in this business, I have had occasion to hear from the parents of people who have been severely damaged, or people who have overdosed and died from drugs, and that for me underscores the urgency of this issue, because the whole synthetic drug is not an isolated incident. It's something that's very common. It's something that all young people know about. a colleague of mine who is a toxicologist up at St. Mary's in Duluth said in 1 2-week period, she saw 5 incidents of people coming into the emergency room for bath salts in a 2-week period this year. 3 of them had to be put immediately on dialysis. And they were not all young people. She said one, and no offense, because I just turned 60, but one, they weren't all young. One of them was even over 50, an old guy, she said. Well, thank you. So it's, the demographic is not limited to young people. It is something that's growing, and I would really like to have confidence in the state of Minnesota that we can get ahead of this curve somehow. So thanks for asking.
Representative
Mr. Chair, I was hoping that you'd say something more than act decisively.
Well, it's complicated. Everybody in the whole country is struggling with how do you do this? How do you get ahead of the curve with bath salts? And I know that there has to, I think going at it from as many ways as you can, this food, drug, and cosmetic thing, I think that's a great way to go. They were really successful in Illinois, and I would hope this committee might even bring in the person to talk about exactly how that went, and maybe throw a little money at our Attorney General's office to be able to go do that in Minnesota, because it was very effective.
Thank you.
Representative Johnson.
Mr. Chair, one question I have is looking at the Exhibit 8 that you hand out on page 16 of this handout. Why do you think the bath salt exposure numbers have been going down the last year and a half? Is it possible that the laws this legislature enacted in 2011 had anything to do with it, or education efforts, or lack of availability of these?
Right. That is an interesting phenomenon that the bath salt figures have dropped, and part of it may be that because of the change in our 2011 state law, that they did become less available and therefore less widely used. It's also possible by the nature of these calls to the poison center. A number of these come from emergency room doctors, that when they get an incident and they want to get clarification on what are the symptoms that this might be, they will place a call to the poison center to get some more instruction on how to deal with it. So part of this decline could possibly be that as doctors in parts of the state became more adept at responding to bath salts, they didn't place those calls to the poison centers frequently because they knew how to identify it by that time.
Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I have a few questions here. Wondering if in current law, if the manufacturers of synthetic drugs are held responsible at all in any criminal form.
Does anybody know that answer? I'm looking to Wade. Wade, do you know that? Because I don't know, but I know he knows.
Welcome, Mr. Setter.
Mr. Chair, my name is Wade Setter. I'm the superintendent of the BCA. I can't speak emphatically across the board, but I think the challenge for us is much of this is imported internationally. So it's either web-based or some other importation. So if it's coming from China, is the majority, is my understanding. So it's very difficult to hold the manufacturers responsible when they're in a foreign country for us at the state level.
Representative Franson.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'm not, a lot of you are law enforcement on here, but I'm just coming from a mother's point of view, a mother of 3 kids. And as a mom, I can only imagine with other moms if their child was addicted to some sort of narcotic of any sort, how scary that would be. But as a mom, I want those that are pushing the drugs to be held responsible for the harm that they are inflicting upon our children. So is there any sort of control that we can do if they are being imported from other countries? What can we do to stop it from getting into our state?
Mr. Setter.
Mr. Chair, Representative, the challenge for us is, as we've discussed throughout this process, is a little bit unique in the law enforcement community. We can only enforce the law and arrest those for distribution when they're distributing a substance that's prohibited by law. And as we said, even a couple of years ago when we first implemented our synthetic law, it went into effect on August 1st. By August 9th, our lab had identified 8 or 9 new substances that were already outside of that classification. So when Ms. Fukowski had said that the challenge for us is enforcing or prohibiting something by statute so we can take a law enforcement action that hasn't been invented yet. It's very, very difficult that we move as quickly as we can, and the rulemaking for the Board of Pharmacy has been one of those tools that's at least allow us, when we identify a new substance, to go through the rulemaking process, prohibit it, so then we can take law enforcement action.
Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And possibly to the chair or to someone else on the committee that may know, maybe perhaps Mr. Schoen or Representative Schoen, is there a way that we can just craft a law that says if there is a product that is being manufactured that would cause an addiction and would harm the person using, that it would be, now medication, prescription medication obviously is different, but if it's being sold without a prescription and it's going to cause an addiction or some sort of harm.
Alcohol produced.
Mr. Chair,
Representative Schoen.
Representative Franzen gave me quite a slate there, and I could say chocolate in my world, but one of the things that we look at is and Chair Paymar pointed this out, was alcohol. And just on those, from state by state, it may be different. There was back in the day, you used to get Everclear over in the Dakotas, but you couldn't get it in Minnesota because it was too, the proof was too high, and we didn't have that. We evidently didn't allow it in Minnesota to be sold. But you could manufacture it, and it wasn't illegal. And the same thing, now, there were some labs, and I don't want to quote the states, but there was a pretty good-sized lab in central USA. That they were a pretty big exporter of this around the state for the synthetics, especially the synthetic cannabinoids. But the bath salts is coming from different areas, and everything's coming from different areas. And so it's difficult to be on top of that. So now you're asking me research questions on the legality of creating a law that says you might be addicted or not. I don't have that answer. I think if that was the case, we'd be there. And one of the things we really, I think, was important when we pulled the committees together today was to talk twofold and go, we've been all over the state of Minnesota and heard these devastating stories, of which I've seen and the two representatives to my right have seen in their day jobs as well, personally, and the effects are devastating. But now it's to the point of what are we going to support? And so, you may have folks that think that we're maybe being too regulatory by impinging on someone's business work as far as what they can sell and what they can't sell. And then I also have the concern of, do we have folks that are just think that we should just legalize everything in the first place? And, I'm not okay with that, certainly, because I agree with you that this is a poison. And they know they're selling it. So what we need to do is get folks to work together here and figure out, okay, what's the plan from here on out? And I think, as you and I said, on the Health and Human Services side of things, too, and I'm looking forward to hearing the education piece, because we know some things worked for methamphetamine. We know that the use fell off and the manufacturing fell off because we enacted laws. And you're absolutely right, ma'am, when you said that laws do work, and this is a good thing. And so what is it going to be? What are we going to support, and what measures are we going to support? When we talked about Cody Weiberg at the Board of Pharmacy, I hope that we did have a discussion about opening up some rulemaking ability at the Board of Pharmacy, like the DEA has on emergency rulemaking, to say, no, this is not safe, and until the legislature convenes in between that time, we need to be able to shut this down and say, no, you can't sell that. And then if the legislature comes back and says, yes, that's fine, but we also have to agree that the people around this table accept that we're going to give some authority, give up a little bit of authority in the meantime to make those decision makings. And I think some of those may be the most likely ability. But to your original point, I haven't seen something come across in my work, even in working the narcotics and violent crime, where we've been able to go after someone in particularly for manufacturing what has legal components to it, until we got further on, and the closest case may be the having precursors for methamphetamine production. So if there's something there that we can do, I think it's not a bad suggestion, but I think that was a tough hill to climb when it happened.
Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, not so much on the follow-up there. That certainly is a lot to think about, though, isn't it, Representative Schoen? The prescription drugs. Wow, that's a lot of prescription drugs there that we have a problem with. I know that there are procedures in place that if somebody is looking for a prescription drug, such as codeine or Oxycontin, that doctors can, when they're writing a prescription, check to see if they have refilled their prescriptions at other places. Yes. Thank you. So I'm just wondering, why do you think that we have such a rampant use of, or how are we able, people getting in trouble with prescription drugs these days? I mean, when there are procedures in place. I mean, what are we missing here?
Well, that's a broad question. Part of the increase in prescription drug abuse in this country is driven by the supply of prescription drugs, and in 2010 there were 210 million prescriptions written for opioid painkillers. Okay, that's enough to medicate every adult in this country for a month, 24/7. So either we have a lot of pain in this country, or there, and medical practice in this country has been accused of undertreating pain historically. But there's just a lot of it being used, and that is part of it. Prescription opiates work in the same mechanisms of action as heroin. Many people who become addicted to prescription opioids turn to heroin, where we are in a part of the country with very high purity, low cost. So it's part of a larger issue. And unlike, every drug problem has its specific nuances about how to best address it. With prescription drug abuse, really addressing it involves looking at how medicine is practiced. And that's a tough nut to crack, and that's a hard thing to change. With these synthetic drugs, even if we do have Cody Weiber give us all the chemicals that he can add more rapidly than the law, than this body can enact, even if we have that, because there is such money motivating this problem, even if we have a list, like Mr. Setter said, it would be, people change it within days to get around this. So it really is an emerging issue. It's an emerging issue of law. It's an emerging issue of how to regulate and control drug abuse. And what's happening here is really at the forefront of how to figure out how to address it, because we know if we just keep doing it the way we always have, that's not going to be effective.
Mr. Setter, before you comment, I just want to ask if we could maybe just focus in on the synthetic drug portion. I mean, I'd love to go down that path of prescription drugs, but we'll be here for 7 weeks in a day. But so go ahead with your comment.
Mr. Chair, all I would add is we can't underestimate the impact of Internet or web-based purchases as well. And so it becomes incredibly difficult at the local level when you have somebody ordering over the Internet, getting it delivered to their house. There's virtually no opportunity for interdiction either on the law enforcement side. So I just want to suggest that that's part of the problem.
Understood. Thank you. Representative Franson?
No, I guess you made yourself clear that you only want to deal in synthetics, but I would argue that looks like on this sheet that prescription drugs is a lot bigger problem.
Yeah, maybe I could just jump in for
Chair
a
Liebling.
second. Mr. Chair, thanks. I just want to say that, this won't be the only time we'll be discussing this, and I agree. We really need to get our arms around this whole problem, because obviously it is a big problem. So, we health policy people will be definitely dealing with this some more.
Thank you for your testimony, both of you. Christine Ingebretson, or Kristen, my apologies. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Dr. Kristen Ingebretson. I'm a board-certified clinical toxicologist at Regents Hospital in the emergency room. So what that means is all I do is act as a consultant for physicians and healthcare providers in handling drug overdoses. So they will ask my opinion, how do we treat this patient who just ingested this drug? Do we give them charcoal? Do we empty their stomach? Do we give them an antidote? Do we dialyze them? that's what I do. I would agree with the testimony here provided before me. It all seems consistent with what I see. I would basically argue that this is not an inner city problem. We are not just seeing it at Regions or Hennepin. We are seeing it at very small towns. Lakeland, Stillwater hospitals are also been involved, small communities, and it is a big problem. We have done a great job so far from the legal system by trying to prevent this, but unfortunately, it's only a drop in the water. As mentioned before, they continue to make new synthetic drugs faster than we can identify and or treat them, to be honest. In 2009, the synthetic cannabinoids had about 2 out there. And the synthetic bath salts had about 4 different products out there. In 2012 alone, there's estimated over 50 new synthetic cannabinoids and over 30 new synthetic bath salts coming out that are here, and about 75 different other synthetic drugs in this area. That puts us over in the 150 to 200 new chemicals this year coming out. We can't keep up. So as stated previously, they mark on these containers or in the packets that they do not contain, the top 4 drugs that have been banned by law, but they've got new ones in there, and unfortunately we can't even identify what they are. Our lab assays don't detect them, and that is one reason why people use them. The second reason is they're cheap. The third reason is they're accessible. And you guys have really made a good dent in trying to prevent that from the head shops, but they still can purchase it online. And a lot of people use it because they think it's safe. They're promoted as herbals, as made in a chemistry lab. People tend to think that because they're made in a lab or they're herbal, that they're safe, and they are not. The honest truth is, as stated previously, is they have not been tested in humans. And when they come to me and they ask me, what does this do? The answer is, I don't know. I can tell you what I see. They are very, very different. The bath salts are extremely agitated. They look like some of the worst methamphetamine that you could imagine. They are very dangerous to themselves and to healthcare providers. They are not typically real young. As mentioned before, our average age is probably in the 30, 40, 50, and I've seen mostly 50-year-olds also taking the bath salts. The synthetic marijuanas are much different. They cross all demographics, economics, backgrounds, so we are seeing it primarily in a younger generation. It is the 16-year-old, 18-year-old that is typically presenting to the emergency room. Unfortunately, they are children, and they are curious, and they try things. And again, because it is cheap, easily accessible, and they seem falsely informed that it is safe, they'll try it. They'll smoke it. They smoke it just like marijuana, traditional marijuana, and within 1 or 2 single drags or tokes off the cigarette will come into the emergency room seizing. And that is the most probably frequent complication that I see. And they just don't realize the effects. It can cause a lot of effects that I never realized, and we still don't understand what's happening. Recent colleagues have reported in the pediatric literature that 16-year-olds, they've got a couple case reports now, 16-year-olds having heart attacks. And what's really interesting, I would not expect regular marijuana to cause heart attacks in 16-year-olds. This drug is different. It is not like typical marijuana. And what's really interesting is these kids did not have the heart attack, an hour after smoking the drug. It happened 2 weeks later. And they actually took these children and checked their arteries. They were not obese kids. They did not have heart disease. It was actually the drug that caused it. And so in animals, in some of the very minimal research we have, it acts very, very different. As stated previously, it excites them, it gets them agitated, it causes seizures, it causes cardiovascular problems, and even in rats and mice causes paralysis. We do not understand yet what is going on, and we have no antidote to treat it. So at this time, I am definitely for any legislation that could help prevent our access to our young children's getting these chemicals. As far as legislation in prosecuting these individuals, it is very, very difficult. Again, most of it is across seas, but some of it is just being made in kids' apartments, in back garages. They show it. You can get onto YouTube and the internet, and they'll show you exactly how to make this. They'll sell the chemical for you to spray onto some basic herbs, and it's a synthetic chemical, synthetic marijuana, that is sprayed onto the herbs, and you make it yourself. And trying to follow up, unfortunately, they don't have a big building with the address printed on there where you can go find these individuals. They just send it through you to through the mail, and so following up or prosecuting these manufacturers is very, very difficult. As far as the bath salts, as I said, they have decreased. We've seen a decrease, but I think it is going to continue with the new agents out there. I also think that the synthetic marijuanas are going to continue to increase without a doubt. And the reason why I say that is if you think of the other drugs, such as the opioids, we started out with poppy seeds. Then we went to opium. Then we got morphine. Then we got some better ones. We identified the receptors in the body, and we were able to figure out, we can make stronger drugs. We can make methadone. We can make heroin. We can make Demerol. Now we have isolated and identified the cannabinoid or marijuana receptors in the body. And I have no doubt that these individuals are not just going to stop and say, hey, we'll just, stop at making these. They are going to make more and more potent drugs because they can. So at this time, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Representative Mullery.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that a lot of the gang fights are over marijuana sales. Are they at all involved in the synthetic marijuana at all, or?
So no, normally when you see reports on marijuana, they are not including the synthetics. Most of the, as I said, the lab assays do not detect them. So if we hear or see reports on a person had an adverse effect from marijuana, that is going to be completely separate from the synthetics. Same in marketing and the money associated with it. Again, another reason why they probably will not discontinue making these synthetic drugs is it's well over $1 billion. I've seen almost a $5 billion market from these drugs, synthetic drugs.
Representative Mullery.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I didn't get the answer to
I apologize.
my simple question. You answered a lot of things I didn't know. Are the gangs at all involved with the synthetic marijuana sales?
We have not seen a gang issue. We definitely see more of the gangs with the cocaine, the methamphetamines. I don't see that why it couldn't be a possibility for future for them to become involved because it is a big market. But right now it seems most of them are ordering, just going to the head shops and picking up the synthetics, or they are ordering them over the internet.
Thank you. No.
Chair Liebling.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And, a few years ago, we were able to get control of the meth lab problem in the state by controlling the precursors when we put pseudoephedrine behind the counter. And, of course, it didn't stop meth in the state, but it did stop a lot of the lab problem we had. So you just mentioned that certain percentage of this is being manufactured in people's homes, I assume, or right here in the state. So my question is there any precursor that is common to any of this that we could do a similar thing by controlling a precursor that at least we could discourage that portion of it that's being manufactured here?
Right. That is a great question. Most of these drugs are very, very similar to amphetamines or come from khat, the cathinones. And so there are laws already out there that have made these drugs illegal. As stated previously in other testimony, all they do is change the chemical structure, a side chain. They add an iodine, a bromine, and now it is a new chemical. We do have the Federal Analogs Act, which does say that if a synthetic chemical or drug is proven chemically or pharmacologically similar to a Schedule I drug, it too can be considered basically a scheduled drug or controlled substance. And so we have the laws out there, but we're having very, very difficult time enforcing them. And so the answer is there is not exact one precursor, but they are coming off of your basic amphetamines is where they're coming from, that structure.
I'm sorry, we're done. No. Representative Schoen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think this is probably to the committee as a whole. It's one thing we've learned along the way is be careful with the term synthetic marijuana, because in society, like it or not, marijuana does have a different designation in people's mind than what this is, because this is more associated with LSD, PCP, methamphetamine, and that is not the same thing. And so we use the term synthetic marijuana very loosely, and it almost hinders our ability to communicate to the public the dire need that we need to do something. So I just would caution everybody to be careful with that term.
Excellent point. Any other questions for the testifier? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Much appreciated. At this time, I'd like to invite Adam Peterson, Minnesota Teen Challenge, and anyone that you might want to bring down with you, feel free. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us, Chairman, Representatives. My name is Adam Peterson. I'm on staff at Minnesota Adult Teen Challenge, which is a short-term and long-term faith-based drug and alcohol treatment and recovery program. We have over 500 residents currently in our program, and a lot of our residents have had experiences with these substances. I'm just going to speak briefly about kind of how we view it and what we do in prevention efforts, and then I've actually got 4 representatives, 4 current residents that are currently in the program that are going to come down and just speak to their personal experience with these substances. And thank you so much for the clarification on the terms used. It is marketed as something that's safe by calling it synthetic marijuana, but it's extremely different. You know, the synthetic cannabinoid is a better way to, designate it just because of the stigmas attached to marijuana. But at Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge, we have a substance abuse prevention program that goes into high schools and middle schools all over the state. Last year, speaking to over 140 high schools and middle schools, to over 50,000 students. And we participated. The news story from Blaine was brought up earlier about the individual that had lost his life because of some of these substances. And we participated in a news story and built a strategy and started surveying the students back in 2010 and 2011 that were try to quantify some numbers on the use of these substances. And we have seen a decline as well since the legislative action in 2011. Last year, 18,000 students were surveyed from 6th to 12th grade. 22% had used illegal drugs. 12% of users had experimented with synthetic drugs, both categories of the synthetic cannabinoids and the bath salts. As Carol had stated earlier, and someone else had pointed out, the demographic is very different. The teens experiment, but one thing we've seen in the treatment realm is also a lot of people that are currently in treatment that maybe they're court ordered, maybe they're there for drugs or alcohol or meth or heroin, but they aren't ready to quit. This is one of the demographics that's using these drugs because they're very difficult to track. You can't drug test them. And so we've had numerous incidences of individuals acting different, like they're on a substance, they get drug tested, nothing shows up, and then we come to find out later that they got their hands on some of these substances. And so it is definitely a huge concern. And then the one thing I'll say before I bring up the other individuals is we have seen a lot of positive moves made, but there is still a lot of work to be done as well. We did a parent event last night in Eden Prairie, and there were multiple parents that had talked about their students right now experimenting with the synthetic cannabinoids, and so they're still getting their hands on it, and so that is a great concern. But I'm just going to have two of the guys come down and share briefly about their experiences with these substances, how they got it, why they used it, and kind of the experience that they had while they were using it. So please welcome them.
Thank you, and welcome to the committee, and if you could just please identify yourself for the record and go ahead with your testimony.
My name's Caleb Birch. I'm 26 years old, and I'm a resident at Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge in the long-term program. I feel really honored to be here, and I hope that my story can help in any type of way. I was arrested in 2008 for ecstasy distribution, and I had many years of addiction behind that, leading up to that day. The court ordered me to treatment, and I had remained sober for about 2 years after that arrest. I had to serve a period of time in local jail confinement, and after being released from there, a friend of mine had introduced me to, I'm sorry, I got to use the term synthetic marijuana, but I definitely agree with what you were saying. He showed me that you could get these drugs from different stores. It was readily available and cheap. Then I met another friend who was actually making the drug in his shed. He was ordering the ingredients right online and just making it right there, and it was cheap and easy to make. Some of the symptoms that I've seen from when I used it and friends that used it around me is that it's extremely addictive of a drug. It took me right from that time of sobriety that I had and dug me right back into my addiction, to the point where a couple years after I was using the drug, I was arrested again on more drug charges. I was sitting in the back of a cop car. I was arrested with synthetic marijuana in my car, and on my way down to jail, I was talking to this cop, and it was one of the same cops who had arrested me back in 2008. And I was just saying, man, I got to get off this stuff. I just got this, cycle or whatever of drug addiction, and I brought myself to Teen Challenge for help. But some of the symptoms that I seen was, that just the loss of reality, the paranoia. I was so sick I was using it on a daily basis. I couldn't get off the drug for the life of me. I was waking up in the middle of the night vomiting. I'd have to wake up and get high again to go back to sleep. Friends around me had seizures. I've seen people go to the hospital. Off of one hit, I've seen people have a seizure. Temporary loss of reality. I guess that's most of my story. Like I said, I had over 2 years of addiction onto this drug, and the reason I kept using it was because it couldn't be detected, and I was on UAs through my probation, and they couldn't detect that I was using it, and I was using it to hide my addiction and to act like I was really sober, but behind closed doors, I was still using drugs and getting away with doing the things that I was used to doing. I wasn't facing my own problems, and I was hiding behind my addiction by continuing to use because I knew that I could get away with it. And I feel really blessed to be off of it, and it was really difficult to get off of it. I went through withdrawals, and that was the main drug that I was using was that synthetic marijuana. I wasn't using other drugs on a daily basis or as frequently as that. But that's my story. Thank you for listening.
You, sir?
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Banke. I'm 37 years old. I also reside at Minnesota Teen Challenge. I started using synthetic marijuana back in late 2011, also because I knew it could not be detected on a drug test. I got out of a sober house. I moved up to the Duluth area I was a customer of the last place on earth on a daily basis for almost through, I think he might have got busted in late August, or like they were going to come in and do something in late August. It was a daily thing for me. It was just to see the stuff that was going on there. It was, you would go in to buy big old lines full of people to go buy a drug in a can that was going to ruin their life, that everyone said it was legal and there was nothing wrong with it. I've heard ladies say that they changed the chemicals. They would do anything just to, it's not, you can't consume it. There's nothing wrong with it. The cops are outside every day just like, wow. There was people preaching on the streets, but I did not care because I didn't think it was doing anything to me. Later on, though, I did notice some effects. My friends noticed effects. It would cause you paranoia. It causes shortness of breath. My friend went to the hospital on 3 or 4 different occasions, just like with complete panic attacks. It's just a bad drug that I am so happy that you guys, whatever you have done, just commend you all for getting it so you cannot sell it in stores, or at least definitely a lot of majority they cannot sell it in stores. I commend him being indicted yesterday. It's a bad drug that we need to get off the internet. That I don't know how we can go about doing it, but we need to get it so we can't buy it because it's ruining our lives. It ruins kids' lives because they just don't think there's nothing wrong with it. They don't think it's a drug. It's not marijuana. It's synthetic marijuana, as the gentleman would say. And I think it's just as bad, if not worse. I think it's stronger than regular marijuana. The chemicals that they put on it, there's different flavors of it. Just the different flavors that they put on it. What the chemicals that they have to use to make that, and then you're going to put that into your lungs. I never experienced with any bath salts, but I've heard tons of horror stories over that. I've been to treatment centers where people said that it's 10 times worse than meth, hallucinations, going to like state hospitals because they just lose their minds. And I just commend you all again for all this that you guys are doing, and thank you all.
Thank you for your testimony. Next.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Jake McSpadden. I'm also a resident at Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge. The whole issue here, I would call it a sort of an epidemic, of course. And one of the driving forces I think we'd all agree behind this whole situation is money. In the nation today, people will do what they can to have a successful life in the means of financial security for themselves, of course. I believe that the drug, as you said, sir, definitely is on the other side of the fence, not in the courtroom here, but when you're out in the using public with the younger generation of kids. That is the cognitive distortion that's being portrayed to people who haven't tried it. It's synthetic marijuana. Go ahead and try it. It's just marijuana. And then, of course, with underdeveloped, maturity towards life and life decisions, a lot of people would say, okay, I'm going to try it, because a lot of desensitizing, is going on in the public. Kids are learning about drugs at a younger age. I'm in the prevention program at Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge. I just spoke at Hopkins School this morning, and I was very surprised to see that most 7th graders knew a lot more about drugs than I had expected. So, as you said, what it all comes down to here is we're looking at the importance of life. We have individuals dying off of the drug, people losing their minds, people causing havoc in the city, running around. To keep the peace, yes, absolutely. I believe this movement is something to be paying close attention to. To be tracking it on the internet, I'm going to have to say that with technology nowadays, I'd hope you guys could bump heads with a couple individuals who could maybe possibly start tracking in some sort of way the selling of it. But then again, there's a ramification of how easy is it to pick up and move to another place or change computers and addresses. So I understand the implications and the ripple effect that's going on with this. But I believe that your heads are all in the right places. Thank you for allowing us to come here today. That's my story. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sir?
Hello, my name is Eddie Lloyd. I'm also a resident at Minnesota Adult Teen Challenge. I'm 22. I've been in the program for about 12 months. I've also experienced the usage of K2. Yeah, it's a very dangerous substance. I've woke up in the ambulance on it before, and I just want to comment on what this lady said. Yeah, my mother was very terrified when she was aware that her son was doing controlled substances. These guys said, it's gonna be very hard to get off the streets. It's not just in stores. It's on the streets now. You can get it anywhere. It can be in a garage, anywhere. It's not hard to get. And younger teens, they're getting it. It's just the solution is gonna be hard. I really don't know what to say. I don't have a solution for it, but my usage of it, I was very paranoid, and the biggest effect that I experienced was my heart rate. I thought that I was gonna die that day. My heart rate was probably just going and going and going. I'm blessed to be here. I thought I was gonna die the day I smoked that K2, but I just hope that you guys find a solution to this, and I thank you for having me here, and I'll just end with that. Thank you.
Representative Franson, did you have a question?
Well, more or less a statement, Mr. Chair. First off, I'd like to thank those from Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge for sharing your very personal stories about your addiction with these dangerous drugs. I was just looking over here with Representative Rosenthal and Representative Ward on how easy it is to find this stuff online, and I am just shocked. I don't shop for this kind of stuff, so this is the first time on my website, so NSA, if you're listening. But anyway, and Representative Liebling and I had talked about this a while ago, a few weeks ago, about the fact that these individuals that just testified, these are somebody's children. These are somebody's kids. No matter what age, somebody gave life to these children. And the fact that they are falling into this trap that somebody is leading them into is absolutely appalling, to think that somebody is profiting off of destroying children's lives. And, I'd like to see some policy where instead of actually going after the people that have the drugs and looking at those individuals as people that have an illness, and seeing more of a prosecution of those that are harming our youth and those that are getting addicted. And I hope that Representative Liebling and I can kind of work on those issues on the Health Committee next year.
Good, thank you. Mr. Peterson, did you want to wrap up?
Yeah. As some of the other speakers have talked about, education prevention is, I think, one of the keys in this, in a solution to this, is getting to them before they make up their mind about the drugs, because what they're hearing from media and TV and their friends is a very skewed message. And so education, evidence-based best practice, just a real cognitive, all across the board from many different sources, educating parents on this. The parent events that we do, we put up the packets, we put up the names and things like that, and ask them if they've seen it, ask them if they've heard of it, and we're just amazed that even with some of the media attention it's gotten, not many people are aware that these things are readily available or online, and a lot of parents don't monitor the internet and things like that. And so building education programs to really get to the key individuals that can help prevent possible addiction and the deaths that have been spoken about today. So any questions?
Representative Slocum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for bringing up education, because I'm sitting here listening to this and I'm thinking there isn't a stick big enough. This synthetic situation is so effusive. They change the chemicals. You've got the internet segment that makes it even more difficult. Do we have a stick that's big enough to stop this? And I don't know that we do, but at least I haven't seen anything in my purview. But educating kids so that hopefully they pause. And I know a lot of times kids don't pause enough, but at least maybe to say, this might not be a good decision. I think, and educating the parents, do kids listen to parents? Sometimes. But the kids in particular, and young adults, so that they just step back a little bit and say, do I really want to go through this? Do I want to do this?
Yeah, educating the people that educate the students, because you hit it on the head. Do they pause? That last part of their brain to develop in boys doesn't develop till 27, 28. Some girls 21, 22. That's the frontal lobe, the ability to make decisions. And so they don't look at it as we look at it. They don't see the consequence at the end of the smoke or at the end of the chemical. And so helping them to pause by educating them and educating others and building awareness, I think, is key. And there isn't one stick big enough, but if we get a lot of us with a lot of sticks, I think we can combat it.
Chair Liebling.
Yeah, thank you. And also, I want to also thank all of you who've come forward with your personal stories. And we know that's a tough thing to do, but it's extremely helpful to us. One thing as we think about doing some kind of education around this, we've all sort of identified that we need to change the name. And so we've talked about that, but I haven't heard anybody offer another name. And I'm wondering, these substances must on the street have other names. I mean, I'm just looking to, does anybody, can you tell us what else is it called? I mean, we need to start the message campaign by renaming it, if nothing else.
Well, I believe that Carol had spoken to it as synthetic cannabinoids, and so I'm wondering if that is correct, if that's the correct name. Also,
personally, I don't think that helps a lot.
Right.
I think we need something that, if it's a poison, call it a poison.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. And again, to the four of you that came down here to testify, I know it's difficult to come forward and tell that story, but know that that's very compelling testimony, I think, to all the members of the committee. So we certainly appreciate it and appreciate your time, and thanks for coming. At this time, I'd like to invite down Assistant Commissioner Dave Hartford with the DHS to talk about this wonderful, much anticipated educational program. Representative Shaw.
Representative Slocum, you made a good point and on the big enough stick, and I think the issue with Duluth was we're finally able to carry the stick that came from the federal government, and we haven't dealt with this at the state level. And when we're prosecuting, the federal government is certainly focused on a lot of different areas, and we're much more nimble at the state level if we have the authority to do so, where our local agencies can go in, deal with it, and that's the issue we need to be able to have the authority on and come up with those ideas and how we're going to do that, where we're not constantly coming back every 6 months, or all of a sudden the day we leave session they come up with a new design. So I think that's one of our focuses, and one of the things that we're looking for ideas on that as well too. So, and looking for support for some of the ideas that maybe we're going to lay out there. So.
Good, thank you. Commissioner, welcome.
Mr. Chair, Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. I'm Dave Hartford, DHS Assistant Commissioner of Chemical and Mental Health Services, and I'm here this afternoon representing the Minnesota State Substance Abuse Strategy, which we're 1 year old now. This is really a work group of 8 state agencies, including also National Guard, Minnesota National Guard, tribal relations. So as a larger group around state government, it's really the first of its kind in the country to bring together a grouping of state agencies like this to coordinate efforts around the huge issues around substance abuse. I mean, if you just look to what does it cost state government on average, it's as much estimated as much as 15% of state government dollars go in the area of substance abuse when you start to look at crime and healthcare dollars and look at what's the total cost. So a significant issue for the state. So the strategy group, there are a number of different work groups. We're, like I say, 1 year old. We're hoping to create a report as to accomplishments in the last year. One of the high points from the strategy, and it's really a long-term framework, strategic framework. During the first year, the number one priority was really to take on the opiate issue that we had in Minnesota. So there's been a great deal of work, everything from educating physicians to, it's been talked a little bit about prescription monitoring program, improving quality on a methadone program, so a variety of different work. What the strategy looks like I said, a number of different state agencies, eight major state agencies. As it relates to this project, like I say, we've had in-standing opiate work group that's done a lot of work. And as this topic emerged, we met with committee members and really came forward to, in the last month or so, to consider what would be a response that us as joint state agencies could do to respond to this public health problem, epidemic, if you will. So the first piece I want to take on, synthetic drug problem, and I'm just going to relate back to, I did attend the hearing in Duluth last summer. It was probably, as you heard in the testimony from many other people here today, it was probably one of the most stunning, kind of heart-wrenching testimonies I've ever heard of, when you actually heard all of these stories from emergency room and people that had been exposed to these substances. And we heard more of it today, really, but just kind of a glimmer of how severe this problem is. So the approach to it, what are we going to do about it? Well, 2 aspects, the legal and educational approaches. And I certainly support whatever legal approaches to do supply reduction that we can do. But like I'm afraid, though, that like many other wars on drugs, that we really need to figure out demand reduction along with supply reduction. And that's really what I'm going to speak to today, is kind of the other half of what can we do about the supply reduction. 2 just very general concepts I'm going to put out. One is we want to invest where we get the most bang for our buck, so evidence-based practices, whatever we do, we should try to use the best knowledge that we have out there. And the other principle is really working with local communities. What we find is that the best prevention efforts are always community-based and multi-agency-based in order to be effective. I could go back to all prevention is actually local, not to say that we in state government or federal government can't be supportive, but those are important principles. Just a couple of highlights that I put in this slide. One is just a huge cost shift, how much we don't invest in prevention. As this first couple of bullet points, one, 95 cents of every dollar spent by government goes to pay for the consequences. We spend on average 1.9% on prevention of the problem. 2009, a third of teens said they could get prescription drugs within 1 day. 1 in 5 teens could access drugs within an hour. And these are kind of national national pieces. And again, I'm going to tie together a couple of different drug issues and tie it back to synthetics here. And then lastly, I think it's a very important principle is, and I think you've heard it from all of the testimony you've heard today, about the focus group here are young people in particular. And we know when we talk about addiction that if a child can reach age 21 without tobacco, without alcohol, without illicit drugs, they will virtually not develop dependence. That this whole piece of the developing brain in kids is critical to take on. Also in testimony today, I think this is a very important concept as we think about what we need to do. You see this graph, and the graph depicts marijuana use among 12th graders over the last, goes back to the 70s. And the direct correlation, you see the mirror image there, about the perceived risk of smoking marijuana to how much marijuana gets used. And I show this for a reason, because it's always the case that, as you can see, in more recent years, people are perceiving there's less risk to marijuana, so our rates of marijuana usage are going up. And this whole concept of synthetic drugs being perceived as safe is a huge concept. It's been mentioned in a couple of ways that we need to call this something other than synthetic marijuana, because as soon as we call it that, people think, oh, marijuana, it's in that same category and that it's safe. That this is a huge messaging problem that we have around this, because this perception is critical for people who are going to choose or not use. I heard in the testimony in Duluth very clearly, and you heard it again today, people perceive these substances as safe. They're illegal. I've heard this, I don't know how many times now. They're illegal. They're being sold in a store. They call it marijuana. It's just something else that that's a legal substance. So the perception of the dangers is very low compared to what the reality is. As we've been hearing all afternoon, this is a national problem. It's across the news, really nationally, people struggling with it. The big news in it, how many teens are using synthetic marijuana? Estimated as much as 11% in 2012 of high school seniors using within that year. I supplied this slide to kind of get a sense of the scope of the problem. And again, these are national numbers. Today we're looking at alcohol. Abuse of alcohol, which is still the #1 drug of abuse, is at historic lows today. Actually, for a variety of reasons, alcohol use is at a historic low, where what we're seeing is a rise in marijuana usage. And as you can see from the slide, 12th graders in the last year reporting about 36% using marijuana. And the second drug identified is synthetic marijuana, and it's the same numbers. In fact, I thought interesting, the gentleman from Teen Challenge talking about same number that they gave when they surveyed was really right on with what we're seeing in this national data. Almost 12% reporting the use of synthetic marijuana. And then you can see this whole variety of others. If you do the math on it, 15% of our 12th graders using prescription medication in the past year. The other point I'd like to make about...
Can I just interrupt you, Mr. Chair?
Chair Paymer?
Did you specifically not include alcohol in that chart? You made mention that alcohol use was down, but it's not on the
It wasn't part of this original study. The number there is actually alcohol is historic low. 28% reported being intoxicated with alcohol in the last month. So that is still by far our highest drug of abuse. So this chart is just on illicit drugs.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And I think another point with that is that you actually don't see bath salts standing alone or synthetic marijuana. Most of the time, these are combinations of drugs that kids are using: marijuana, synthetic marijuana, they're drinking, oftentimes opiates and synthetics. So it's not really, you can't really slice out a substance per se. I think some of the past testimony we just heard, it's inexpensive, it's easy to get, so it's kind of added into the mix for people as a drug of abuse. So it's really about polysubstances. As I was just talking about, and I think we heard testimony from really a number, I think you got some great testimony here today about how you actually turn the curve on addiction and substance abuse is really around this 15 to 25 population. That early developing brain, there's a number of features there that I don't think we've really understood well until recently as we've come to know more and more about brain science. And that's what addiction really is a hijacking of brain circuits. And in the developing brain, the adolescent brain is very vulnerable to this. Happens at the same time that the decision-making processes are not fully developed. Also at a time when the adolescent brain is really looking for novelty and tending towards risky behavior. So this decision-making process to engage in these synthetics or drugs like that, it's attractive, easy to get, and so we start to see this behavior. So what about demand reduction? Some of the things that we know is what the federal government has learned over time in their needs for funding of prevention programs. Evidence-based models focus on, one, community involvement and not about programs. As I've done some research around this, even to the point that here in Minnesota, local prevention efforts that give themselves their own name and become more cohesive are much more effective, if you will. That there's local ownership about the issue. In fact, there's a group in the Duluth area that I can think of that's meeting and really quite energetic and doing great work around some of these issues in the Duluth market. That includes many partners, multiple agencies, that law enforcement, businesses, families, schools are all at the table leveraging their part of the local community problem. That they support the same message. That message is important, simple, straightforward messaging that's simple, and that they strive to support positive community norms. This model is a federal model, comes from SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Minnesota has been the recipient of, I believe it's $9.6 million grant from the federal government. It's a five-year grant. We're on the end of our second-year cycle with really quite good results. This is a competitive bidding process that funds, I think we're about 9 communities have received these grants as an example. And these are multi-agency efforts that are sustained. The issue here, and I'm going to digress just a little bit, this is some of our infrastructure that we have in Minnesota today, or some methodology that we've been working with in Minnesota. But the focus has been alcohol, because again, alcohol is our primary drug of abuse, so really all of our prevention efforts have been focused in that direction. And this federal grant, the criteria for inclusion of communities in this competitive grant was around binge drinking, alcohol use in the last 30 days, that qualified communities to apply for this grant, or how they were rewarded. So a variety of different agencies have applied for this, and I thought I'd share a couple. Hopkins Public School District, Olmsted County Public Health, Fairview Range serving Hibbing, North Memorial serving Osseo, Brooklyn Center. So these are a variety of different agencies that have been convening agencies that work to distribute and to really create local infrastructures to address issues. Likewise, we also have a grant I'm just going to speak to. These are our Alcohol and Drug Abuse Division grants, and ADAD, Alcohol and Drug Abuse Division, distributes actually federal dollars for prevention efforts across the state. Another big chunk goes to what's called planning and implementation grants, very similar to the strategic planning little different criteria, again focused on alcohol. We have some very good results from this methodology in the state, where we've significantly identified high-risk communities, put these grants in place, and they have significantly reduced and changed the alcohol abuse in those communities over time. These are typically, both these blocks are basically 5-year cycles of, and I'll go back, this is a specific planning route that the federal government has found is evidence-based. Assessment of needs, building capacity, and planning is phase 1, and then a phase 2 implementation and evaluation phase. So a very structured way to approach substance abuse problems. So I want to give you a little bit of background on what the evidence says if you're really going to go after demand reduction. It's a thoughtful process. It takes and that's the evidence. Now I'm going to move to our current plan, really. What does the State Substance Abuse Strategy Group going to own as an immediate, because again, recognizing that this calls for immediate action, and I'll walk through these. One, we've already accomplished this, was the development and distribution of 20,000 synthetic brochures distributed throughout our Minnesota prevention networks already. That was done this past fall. And again, the brochures were about identifying these as a dangerous substance and needing action. So those were distributed. We plan also to utilize the same regional prevention agencies and statewide strategy partners, these state agencies, to communicate a comprehensive synthetic drug messaging by October of next year. Is to really take what's the national messaging, develop a message, and get that message distributed across the state. We have the infrastructure through our local coordinators and to actually accomplish that piece of work. Another piece is to create and maintain an audience-specific website by next year, December of 14. In fact, I think we can do it sooner than that, and actually use technology, focus the audience to these kids and young people who, and using technology to get that message out there about the dangerousness of these substances. And then lastly, to complete an assessment of current drug education and intervention efforts in Minnesota schools by December, that should be 2013. So those are the things that we see with existing resources that we can just go to work on and get those implemented with our existing infrastructure. That existing infrastructure, just so you're aware, the top two items, prevention planning implementation grants, that one, and the second one, we have 7 regional prevention coordinators who act as a hub across the state to connect with other agencies. That's would be part of our distribution network. Our Minnesota Prevention Resource Center is a hub for resources and a contact point for prevention work. Strategic Prevention Framework, those are 6 grantees across the state, and we also supply a variety of tribal dollars to American Indian tribal prevention.
Commissioner, before you go any further, we do have a couple of questions, and maybe we can just interject here. Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate all of this. A couple of things. I want to go back to the audience-specific website. I'd like to know a little bit more. You said targeted toward kids, but how are they going to be drawn to this? How are they going to find it?
Commissioner Hartford.
Representative, Mr. Chair, I think that piece of how to do the messaging and how to get that out there, I think there's a creation of leveraging some technology that we know kids are attracted to. We can create a website that's appropriate, but actually channeling that, I think that's part of our messaging strategy that's yet to be developed.
Representative Ward.
Thank you. I'm just curious about the messages that you had on page 4 and 5. in terms of correlating legalizing substances, and so therefore having some control over them. This is a challenge with underage abuse and access. But is there some cost saving that can be done? As you mentioned, so much of the cost to the state is in the after use and abuse. So would there be a benefit to putting something into effect where we would legalize substances where we could control them? And now I've got another question.
Commissioner.
Representative, Mr. Chair, I think that, and I'll just express my concern about the adolescent brain, I'm going to return to that, that anytime we increase the availability of substances to adolescents, we run the risk of impacting these young people and maybe inadvertently supporting a route to addiction for these young people. So I'm not going to address the controversy or pros and cons of medical marijuana or those kinds of things. But this issue around our young people, and we know from the years of when we moved the legal drinking limit, that when the legal drinking limit went to 18, that 16-year-olds were drinking. When we moved it to 21, it changed access for these young people. So I'm just going to put out that just as a fact.
Representative Ward.
Thank you. I do appreciate that, and I'm aware of the challenges to the developing brain and how it's just not going to be helpful in a lot of these areas. One of the messages that I've been particularly involved with in the past is the Most of Us, where we do the positive messaging to kids and letting them know, again, in a regionally or high school, a school-specific setting, from surveys, giving information back to kids with very positive messages like 83% of us enjoy, whatever it is, but it says we don't smoke, we don't drink, we don't do, we have fun, we engage in all these lovely things, and the message is most kids aren't, and most kids do want to be like most other kids. So I think there are some really great marketing programs out there that the state could take advantage of, could network with. As you mentioned, the federal funding that's available for some of these programs could really be helpful in getting positive messages out to kids so that they avoid those connections, create positive networks, and avoid the disastrous consequences to early experimenting. Thank you.
Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Hartford, Representative Ward and I were having a little side conversation on regarding the audience-specific.
Excuse me?
Regarding the creation and maintenance of an audience-specific website, which got us thinking on these horrible websites that you can find where they are selling these products. Would it be possible to force those companies to have a banner that when you're going to purchase, if we can't control the sale over online, to force those companies to have a warning sign on the dangers of their product, natural or not natural? Because I was looking at a lot of websites that said this is completely safe, it's all natural, they give you your natural, made in America too. Who doesn't want to buy something made in America, right? But is that a possibility? And a little educational piece before you press buy or whatever.
Representative
Commissioner.
It's certainly well beyond my expertise of regulating the internet, so I really can't address that one.
Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there anyone here on the committee that can possibly answer that question?
Representative Franson, let me say this. You have asked a couple of questions today that are really good questions that I'm not sure that we have clear answers to, which we will I know Mr. Diebel is going to work hard on some of the answers to these questions, as well as Representative Mullery's question. So we will do our best, and unless he chooses to want to answer that now, which he can, we will do our best to follow up on any of the questions that remain unanswered at the end of today. Mr. Diebel, did you want to comment?
Mr. Chair and members, I'd just add that if the purveyors of these substances on the internet are selling something that is currently illegal, such as the product they're selling up in Duluth, which was established this week that were illegal, it's not an issue of them being told to do something and complying with the law. They're clearly on the edge of compliance with the law, so I don't know that requiring them to provide an educational component or a warning would be effective, because they're already at the margins of the law. They're not in it to protect people. They're in it to make money. So it's an issue of currently they're flaunting the laws we have, and by imposing a requirement that they provide a warning about their product, I'm not sure that would be an effective means of deterring them or getting them to comply with the law.
Representative Franson?
Yeah, if I could
Wait.
comment on that.
To that point?
To that point.
Chair Liebling.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to say it one way of, the best filter one could have and the best warning sign one could have would be an attentive parent while the child is using the internet. And of course, we know we don't have that in many cases. But I don't know, and of course, that would be great for all kinds of things. We know it just doesn't happen and can't be a complete solution for that reason. But I think as we think about this, maybe part of our efforts would be toward telling parents that this is happening, because I bet a lot of parents just have no clue.
Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Liebling, exactly. I mean, here, a lot of us are coming up with suggestions and ideas, and we're being told that's not possible. So it's very possible that in this situation that government may not be the answer, but education with the parents, having relationships with their children, one-on-one with their children, may be the best remedy on this.
Chair Paymar.
Pass.
Pass. All right. Commissioner?
Mr. Chair, then I'll proceed with really some recommendations. As I said, I listed off a short list there of things that the statewide strategy is planning to do. I've listed here some recommendations for consideration. One would be investment into evidence-based interventions and diversion programs for students identified at risk. The second is recommending the identification of culturally appropriate interventions and prevention efforts for diverse populations and resources. And lastly, recommend replacement funding. We know that we're about to lose federal funding this next year for the federal strategic prevention framework. So the recommendation isn't so much to exactly replicate this federal grant that we have been receiving for the last number of years, but it's really to consider funding this evidence-based practice for whatever specific population, or if it's synthetics, opiates, if it's young people. These have been focused towards young people in the past for alcohol, but consider, so that model has been proven in Minnesota. It's a major model that comes from the federal government, and it's proved to be very effective, so you could consider funding that kind of investment.
So, Commissioner, do you anticipate, and again, federal government, right, but in June of 2014, the grant ends?
That grant cycle ends. There's a possibility of a one-year extension, and that's kind of the end of that. And we don't know if we'll get the one-year extension, and that is, again, it's targeted right now. It's in its fifth year. So there are 7 communities that have been working. They've developed their plan. They're implementing their plan around alcohol abuse. So I'm presenting this more as a model, but it is, that was $10 million that we received in prevention dollars from the federal government that we're not going to have going forward.
Interesting. Okay, you have further slide?
Then lastly, just lessons learned. Collaborative work of many partners on local, state, and federal levels to coordinate a response to this public health hazard, efforts to take innovative, constructive balance of prevention, public safety, and health care. And again, this needs to be a priority for policy, a policy plan for action. So, any other questions, I'd be glad to answer.
I do have a couple of questions. If we can, one is about the chart that you showed us, which is on page 3 of my handout, which kind of talks about the perception and attitude.
Yes.
And there's a couple of points, like 1988 and 1994-ish maybe, where those lines cross. Do you have a sense of what the reason is, or what happened there, or at what point in time that caused that in those cases?
Mr. Chair, my assumption is that public perception started to change the dangers. There may have been a public campaign, things changed, and really the crossover point is just at about 30% of the population. It looks like it crossed over both times, but it's really that, like I said earlier, that inverse relationship that if people see it as safe, they're going to be using it, and that's really just where those crossed over.
Right. And my other, and it's just more of a comment really than anything, but when you talked about this creation and maintenance of an audience-specific website by December of 2014, I did think I hear you comment that you should be able to get it done earlier than that.
Yes.
And I will say, and I think I'll probably speak for everybody on the committee, that that's one thing that we hear a lot of, is that people are just really starving for information about, what these things are, what they look like, where do I see them, my kids are talking about it, where do I get some good information? We can go to those kind of websites that we were just talking about, or we can find this source. So I just encourage you to, as soon as possible, get something up and running. Any other questions? Representative Muller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you notice, there's huge advances just in the last couple years on brain science. And I'm thinking back to the studies on alcohol receptors. I assume there's something on the same order with these various drug receptors in the brain. Is there any way that they've gotten yet to test who, when I saw most of the studies, they didn't yet have it on alcohol. Some people have the receptors that take them and make you addicted, some don't. No. Is there any way to test either alcohol or these new drugs for that yet? Not test the alcohol and the drugs, but test the people as to whether it's genes or whatever in their cells, or...
Commissioner Hartford.
Representative, Mr. Chair, I think one of the challenges there is we can't even get a hold of what substances are being used because they're changing so rapidly, as was reported through a couple of other testimony here this afternoon. They're changing so rapidly that which substances to even test, even identifying the substances alone has become quite a challenge, because they're changing readily. As we make them illegal, the substances get changed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would wish to testify today? Now would be the time. You need not have signed up. If you're interested in testifying, just come on down. If not, just for everybody's information, as far as steps going forward, and I want to thank Chair Paymar and Chair Liebling for coming today. I think it was helpful. I hope that you found it helpful as well. But as we go forward for the Select Committee, our plan will be that we will probably meet here in December and really kind of start formulating the framework for our report that we'll present come February. I think that we've collected, a lot of data from our meetings across the state, and we've got a lot of recommendations and suggestions. But some of the things that we'll be looking at in December when we come back, and you're certainly invited to come to, is we've got a number of recommendations from the Board of Pharmacy as well as the AG's office that we want to consider whether we want to include those in our report or not. We'll be looking at any legislation that we may want to recommend as part of this report, along with potential for an education prevention program that we just heard a little bit about here today. But I think that if one thing that we have concluded on already is that there's no real solution to this problem in its entirety. We can maybe take bites out of it, but it really is a combination of local efforts, state efforts, and as we hear a lot of talk about internet sales, certainly federal efforts as well. So come December at that meeting, our goal will be to just kind of put together a rough framework of this report that we'll present in February. So with that, I'd open it up to any questions or comments. Representative Schoen.
Mr. Chair and members, just to go back on a couple things that we discussed today. I said this earlier, and I can't say it enough again. This is not marijuana. It's not synthetic marijuana. This is a completely different discussion. This is also a completely different monster. And I know that there's some talk, some folks that think, and there's people in the community that think if we just legalize marijuana, that'll fix this problem, and that's not the case. This is not an addiction to marijuana. This is an addiction to a completely different demon. And we heard the folks from the doctor from Regents talk about how the age range, and so this just isn't a parental monitoring thing either, where we can just say that, okay, well, maybe the government shouldn't be involved. And that was one of my fears too, is that we have this polar opposites of just legalize everything and, oh, this isn't the government's place. And so, certainly that's my concern of where do we muck up the gears on this. And so the scope that we're talking about, I hope that we're being very limited and we're kind of trying to focus in on a very certain problem. The education piece, I think, is certainly something, and I'm glad we had the discussion about as a whole, because that education piece can be on all sorts of addiction, and this can be added to it, because I think different addictions carry the same ramifications depending upon, it doesn't matter what it is, you can have the same problems, and we need to work amongst all of that. So, and that education piece, we know we need to start at a younger age, and that's the way it works. It took us a few years to get to the methamphetamine problem, and we'll never solve everything. We're never going to completely stamp it out. I'm not naive to believe that we're going to completely fix everybody in the world here, but I think we can take that big stick on some of this and get a good swath and get a start. So that is really the biggest point I wanted to make, is this is not the same discussion as medical marijuana, as marijuana. This is a completely different topic, and we can't marry the two and do something productive with this issue. That doesn't mean those issues won't be talked about, and but that is the case. And I do want to comment. I did have a memory come back to me on the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act issue that was talked about in other states, and I do believe that issue itself, one of the reasons that they hung the signs in the head shops of saying not for human consumption, I think that actually was related to that issue. I may not be completely true, but I think that helped them subvert that issue legally too. So there's a lot of things we need to do. We need the input from everybody, and we need support. We need to know where their minds are on the issue, and we need to move something forward that we can actually let our law enforcement and our treatment folks understand what we need to do.
Representative Newberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank everyone for coming today. It's been a good day, and I feel very fortunate to be on this select committee, this subcommittee. Most of you know my background's in emergency medicine, and I want to thank those that were here today. Representative Schoen called this a monster, and he's right. This is a monster. From a pre-hospital point of view, as a professional, I can tell you right now that what Dr. Contarato had mentioned is that these substances shut down all of those off switches in your brain that tell you when your body is experiencing too much. My personal experience in handling patients that are having psychotic episodes or excited delirium or agitated delirium, It is at the point where it takes anywhere from 6 to 10 men my size to hold down one person. And then we usually, the standard treatment is to give them about 350 milligrams of ketamine, which is a horse tranquilizer. Then you have to wait for that to kick in, and it takes about 15 minutes. Then the person becomes catatonic, will become completely lucid or flaccid, and that'll last, because their bodies are so jacked up, that'll last maybe 15 minutes. So you got about 15 minutes to get them into the critical room at the hospital before they wake up again and repeat the process. And at this point, these people, when you get to the point where these people are having these psychotic episodes, all bets are off. Their mental faculties are gone. All they see is what Dr. Conrado had attested to, are people that are trying to hurt them, and the propensity for injury and violence and harm to family members, to police officers, to first responders, to medical personnel is very high. And because these people don't know what they're doing, and those natural off mechanisms that say, hey, you know, your arms or your lungs or your heart are exhausted, you need to stop, those don't exist. People will literally go until their hearts explode. That's the reality. That's the monster, as Representative Sean so appropriately colored it as. And the problem that we have is, as the young gentleman from Teen Challenge, and thank you for coming, had attested to, was the fact that these chemicals, you can't test for them. They were talking about UA, that's a urinary analysis. If you go and pee in a cup, they can't tell. You go to work the next day, they can't test for it because it's not marijuana. And then I think the final icing on the cake is that it's legal. You can walk into tobacco shops, you can buy it online, and for a lot of folks that are struggling with addiction, if something's legal, it's a lot easier to use. That first barrier that you have to cross, that when your conscience kicks in and says, hey, you know, you shouldn't be using this because it's illegal, that's not there. It's legal. So it makes it easier for people to fall into this right from the get-go. Representative Liebling, you had mentioned that there was one of the things that we need to get our heads around is a messaging issue. The best thing that I can come up with is that this is not pot, it's imposter pot. It's imposter marijuana. That's the best message that I can give people. These chemicals stimulate the receptors of the brain that marijuana normally stimulates, except it does it in a way that's extremely destructive. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. The brain, those receptors in the brain think that it's marijuana. They react with these chemicals, except that these chemicals are not marijuana, and they basically burn out those receptors and they destroy the brain and they destroy the developing brain. So we have so many issues to deal with here, and I want to thank everyone for being here, and I want to thank Representative Simonson for having this and for chairing this committee. It's been a very good experience, and I hope we can do some good things here in the future. But finally to echo again what Representative Sean was talking about, this has nothing to do with medical marijuana, because it's not marijuana that we're talking about. We're talking about an imposter chemical that the brain thinks is marijuana that's destroying our kids and our adults. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well said. Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing no other comments, just a reminder that the BCA has graciously invited us to come and tour their lab and look specifically at how they test for synthetic drugs, for lack of a better term. But I think it's interesting, so if you're interested and you haven't signed up yet, let us know and we can maybe carpool a little bit and head over there probably now. So with that, committee is adjourned. Thank you.